Good evening, welcome to Scotland at 7 with me, Gordon Ross. And this evening, joining me in the studio, we have Chris McCusker from the SNP Socialist Group. Welcome back to the programme, Chris.
Evening, Gordon, and thanks for inviting me back on.
Okay, always a pleasure, Chris. And also seated on the other side of the studio this evening, virtually, is Sam Payton from the Save Loch Lomond campaign. Welcome back to you, Sam.
Hi, Gordon, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks, Sam. Now I'm going to press on as usual with the coronavirus update, first of all. And as of 2 o'clock today, a total of 1,045,499 people in Scotland have now been tested through NHS Scotland labs and UK government regional test centres. Of these, 971,144 were confirmed negative, while 74,355 were positive. There are 912 new confirmed cases of COVID-19. There's also one new reported death of a person who is tested positive today. This will be an underestimate of the number of cases, as not everyone with the virus displays the symptoms, and not all of those with symptoms will be tested. Of the people who have tested positive, 1,226 were in hospital last night, 105 of whom were in intensive care. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by coronavirus COVID-19 infections now stands at 3,040. This number only includes those who've died in hospital, having received a positive test for the virus. The latest UK daily figures available show that 49,063 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 194 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings and not just hospitals. Now, if you'd like to join the conversation here this evening, you can do so on Twitter by following us at BroadcastScot and using the hashtag Scotland7. And now to tonight's main news. And Joe Biden's transition team has announced a coronavirus task force as Trump threatens to recount rallies. The new American president-elect has today convened a coronavirus task force to examine the number one problem confronting him when he takes office in January, whilst President Donald Trump pursues several long-shot gambits in a vain attempt to hold on to his job. Joe Biden announced an advisory board led by the former Surgeon General Vivek Murthy and former Food and Drug Administration Commissioner David Kessler to examine how best to tame a pandemic which has killed more than 237,000 Americans. At a press conference in Wilmington, Delaware, President-elect Biden spoke about his plans for tackling COVID-19 and rebuilding the US economy. He spent much of the campaign criticising Donald Trump's handling of the crises and has vowed to listen to scientists to guide his own approach. By contrast, Trump frequently clashed with top health officials over the pandemic and questioned scientific advice. Vice President Mike Pence is meeting with the White House Coronavirus Task Force today for the first time since October the 20th. Trump has so far failed to acknowledge defeat and has launched an array of lawsuits to press claims of election fraud for which he's produced no evidence. State officials called the lawsuits frivolous and say they're not aware of any significant irregularities. Mr. Trump has not spoken in public since Thursday as part of a public campaign to question the election results. He's threatening to hold rallies to build support for his fight to overturn the election result, a move seen as a further attempt to create chaos and distrust of the election result. Meanwhile, the SNP has called for the suspension of Lord Kilclooney over a racist tweet in which he referred to the US Vice President-elect Kamala Harris as the Indian. The SNP House of Lords spokesperson Tommy Shepherd MP said, "It's a disgrace that Lord Kilclooney refuses to accept that comments he made about Vice President-elect Kamala Harris were overtly racist in what was clearly a vile attempt to talk down her historic achievement." Well, Sam, a lot happening this evening, as you know. Donald Trump's still hanging on and hoping to try and challenge the result. But how does this, do you think, contrast with Mr. Biden, the president-elect's approach to taking over control? He seems to be going for basically the biggest threat in America at the moment, COVID-19. Mr. Trump seems to be just hiding around, waiting for things to change, waiting for these lawsuits.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a drama, hasn't it? The way it's all kind of panned out, especially with Trump, the contrast between Trump's behaviour and Biden's behaviour. Trump's acting like a toddler having a temper tantrum because he can't get the toy he wants, and Biden is behaving like a potential leader. And at the end of the day, yeah, regardless of how you think of Trump or Biden, just their general behaviour, the language they use is totally in contrast to each other. But it's good to see that Biden putting together this task force in order, to kind of look into COVID and the effects on the American citizens. But yeah, Trump I'm just waiting on him getting carted out in a white coat of the White House. It's like been sitting watching this saga. I don't really watch TV, I don't watch soaps or anything, but this is just absolutely fantastic entertainment at the moment, watching Trump just refusing to believe that he is no longer be president of the United States.
Thanks, Sam. Chris, what's your reaction to this? How do you feel Joe Biden is behaving so far? Is he beginning to look more like a statesman, do you think?
Oh, definitely. And it's probably a shock to the system for America to actually see somebody operating with a bit of clarity and a bit of leadership, something that the Westminster government are bereft of as well. But the thing that strikes me is that, while Trump is creating this sideshow of scrambling for any sort of source of credibility, we have to ask, where is Mike Pence at this moment in time? His VC, he seems to be a bit missing in action since the results have come in.
Well, according to the report, Chris, Mike Pence is attending the COVID task force meeting for the first time since, I think, the 20th of October. So he's doing something, but quite what he's doing, I don't know.
Well, again, that's in stark contrast to what's happening down in London. Because our national leader, according to CNBC, they actually put out a tweet there stating all the nation's leaders that came out and congratulated Biden. And they listed France, Germany, Ireland, Italy, and all the rest of it. They also listed Scotland as being a nation in its own right, and the UK wasn't listed in that tweet. That was quite good, but what we see here is the fact that our First Minister has been 5 days a week. Constantly updating the nation on what is happening, what action her government is taking, and basically trying to steer us, on a sort of like a steady path through this. What we don't have on the opposite side of the coin is any sense of clarity and leadership from Westminster. And as far as I'm aware, there's been even less showing of clarity and leadership from the White House during Donald Trump's tenure. Basically because he is at pains to dismiss COVID-19 as just something that should be be described as a normal common cold. So. Do you know what I mean? Like, for Mike Pence to, come up and sort of like do a briefing for the first time since, within the last couple of months is absolutely laughable.
Well, if I could come back to you, Sam, just for a moment. This comment that was made, allegedly made by Lord Kilclooney, who described the Vice President-elect Kamala Harris as the Indian. What was your reaction when you heard that?
Well, you could probably see my reaction on Twitter because I did make a comment on it. Basically, it's absolutely disgusting and it's got no place in today's society. It's not got no place at all in any society. But it's about time we just got away from the United Kingdom. And the House of Lords is so outdated. But he's just a disgusting man, and I hope that Twitter basically turns around and puts him in Twitter jail and suspends his account for making racist comments.
Well, let's hope so, Sam. Chris, I take it you read Lord Kilclooney's comments today as well. What was your reaction to this this emerging? Well, it's an insult, isn't it? Really, when you look at the words that were being used.
Well, I should be horrified, but sadly I'm not, because it actually just reflects the attitude of these dotery old farts that actually inhabit, or should I say, inhabit the House of Lords. It's such an outdated system, and it's there to stroke their egos. As if there's something to be, upheld and sort of like, doff your forelock at them and, take your cap off as they pass by. It's a draconian system that is, it's something of, pomp and pageantry that, should be kept for the tourist map, to be quite honest with you. They should actually be selling tickets so that the American tourists can just, wander through, do you know what I mean, and pick up souvenirs as they go. So many years that we've looked back and the House of Lords has produced next to nothing. That things have been debated, on the chamber of the House of Commons, and then they've been kicked upstairs, and they've been debated again, and and came back a former shadow of its original intention, and it gets adopted by the Tory party as, oh, our lords, peers and masters have spoken. They have given their watchful eye over, and paid, careful due diligence to it, for what, getting paid £300 an hour.
I think it's a day, Chris. I think it's a day. But yes, it's still a lot of money.
It's a heck of a lot of money, and it's a heck of a waste of money. It really, honestly, it should be closed down. It should be open to the public as a museum, and these people should not be feeding off the taxpayer for doing absolutely jack diddly.
Okay, Chris. Well, I think you made your feelings very clear there. Anyway, let's move on now. A COVID-19 vaccine candidate is apparently 90% effective, according to Pfizer. The vaccine against COVID-19 is in sight, with the announcement of the first interim results in large-scale trials, showing the Pfizer-BioNTech candidate is 90% effective, according to the manufacturers. Their analysis shows a much better performance than most experts had hoped for, and brings into view a potential end to a pandemic which has killed more than 1 million people, battered economies and upended daily life worldwide. The company says that there have been no serious side effects, while a high percentage of those protected makes the findings especially compelling. Regulators have said that they would approve a vaccine that has far lower, a 50% effectiveness rate, protecting half of those who get it. The phase 3 trials have involved more than 43,000 people and are intended to establish whether the vaccine works. Volunteers are given either the COVID vaccine, which was administered in 2 shots about 3 weeks apart, or a placebo alternative, such as the meningitis vaccine, and neither they nor the doctors know which they have had. So this is known normally as a double-blind trial. So let me come to you first, Sam. Now, we've been desperate for a vaccine for a while, and I think the Scottish Government and also the British Government have announced their plans to roll out vaccination centres within the next month. Are you hopeful, Sam, that this is the beginning of the end of the COVID crisis?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's hopeful because at the end of the day, we all want to get back to some sort of normality of life. Because as much as people are trying their best with social distancing and things, it is affecting people's mental health at the end of the day. So, people are missing out in family get-togethers and being able to socialise the way we used to. So any vaccine is going to be hugely welcomed. Obviously we're sitting in tender hooks, fingers crossed, hoping it all goes well. And it's just waiting to see how it all pans out and waiting on the final data coming out.
Well, thank you for that, Sam. Chris, you've heard these results as well today. Are you sceptical about this, or do you think the science has got it right this time?
Well, I'm not sceptical. I'm hopeful that it's going to prove to be what it's been sort of like lauded as. But I wouldn't say that it's we can all rest on our laurels, as I think Sam was alluding to.
Yeah.
That oh right, okay, we've got a vaccine. If we just wait for it to get sort of like doled out, then we can all go back to normal. I am of the belief of the fact that this virus is going to be with us for the next 20, 30, maybe 50 years and stuff like that. I think it's always going to be.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's always going to be lurking in the background and stuff like that. My bigger issue about this, and as welcome as the news is that, and again, I don't think you or the viewers will be highly surprised when I point this out, is the fact that I'm absolutely shocked at the global markets that are, the stock prices.
Yeah, they shot up, didn't they?
Pfizer have completely shot up, and this one particular company has shot up by 14%.
Of course, it's not the only, Chris. It's not the only company, is it? Because I gather AstraZeneca and various others are in the market as well, trying the same thing.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to point out is that now that this has sort of like arrived. We actually see the narrative on the news that they are all sort of like frothing at the mouth at these sort of like, for what I can only describe as, the capitalist mongers of the right-wing media who are gleefully clapping their hands at the fact that, all these companies are starting to their share prices are starting to increase.
But then it's not just, Chris. It wasn't just the pharmaceutical companies whose shares shot up. The shares across the world shot up, I think, on the news of this.
Oh yeah, but but I mean, what we're seeing is that in an age now where airlines and hotels and other industries have been hardest hit by this pandemic, I mean, 53% of firms benefiting from it have actually died. And it's I don't think that they should be gleefully reporting the fact that their shares are up, because of other people's misery and misfortune. But I mean that just shows what kind of capitalist society that is operating within the Western world at this moment in time. But I mean, people are thinking about profit rather than people. And the other point that I wanted to actually make, Gordon, is that again we see on the news that we haven't even got this vaccine yet, and the news is now asking questions about, who should get it first? Should it be the police? Should it be the NHS? Should it be the teachers? Should it be this? And then what we're going to see is that a rollout of inequality as to who actually qualifies to get this vaccine first.
Chris, Chris, sorry to cut across you there. I just wanted to ask Sam a question. Sam, I heard also today that this particular vaccine, although it is apparently very effective in 2 shots, there is one problem with it, which is it has to be stored frozen at minus 80 degrees, and that would be very difficult for many developing and third world countries to achieve. Do you think, Sam, that that it's going to probably be used mostly in the West first of all before anybody else gets it? Is there a risk, do you think, of that happening?
Yeah, there is, but it's also a risk of a certain tier of society being able to access the vaccine if it's going to be stored at such extreme temperatures. Because if you start going out to the towns and the villages and rural areas of any country,
Yeah.
Being able to transport it and so forth.
Yeah, that level of refrigeration is very extreme as well. That was something that surprised me.
It's going to be, as they said today when I was kind of reading up on it, they were saying there's still, not all the data has been released yet. I mean, obviously it's hopeful at the moment, but all the scientific data has not been released yet. So there's quite a lot of questions that people still have about it that they need to kind of answer. And hopefully, as the next stage of research goes on, they can start to answer those questions. But yeah, I think as it stands at the moment, and as with this extreme storage, it's going to just reach a certain tier of society. It's not going to filter right through in any country whatsoever.
Well, we'll just have to hope that they solve the storage issues. Okay, basically, thank you both, Sam and Chris, for your answers there. And moving on now. Boris Johnson's treaty-breaking internal market bill is facing defeat in the House of Commons. Boris Johnson is expected to suffer a heavy defeat in the House of Lords today over laws allowing him to breach the UK's EU exit treaty, a proposal which has been criticised by US President-elect Joe Biden. The UK Internal Market Bill is designed to regulate trade between the UK's 4 nations after Brexit, but it's been heavily criticised by the devolved administrations as a power grab, which puts control of previously devolved competencies under Westminster regulation. It also contains clauses that the Tory government ministers say are needed to protect Northern Ireland, but which would be a breach of international law. The House of Lords will be voting on whether to strip those clauses from the bill while we are on air. Boris Johnson is widely expected to lose, but is not backing down and may add more clauses back in next month and try to force them into law. The publication of the bill in September provoked widespread criticism, with some saying that it would wreck Britain's international standing. Biden tweeted on September the 16th that anything which risked peace in Northern Ireland would threaten Anglo-American trade. And if the result comes in before the end of this programme, we will try to bring it to you. So let me come to you first, Chris. As I understand it, the Internal Markets Bill at the moment is actually still being debated in the Chamber. How do you expect this to go? Do you expect Boris to be defeated in this debate this evening?
Well, earlier on, there was berating the House of Lords for not being very effective. But again, they gave it its scrutiny, and it's then went back to the chamber. So it's an issue that I didn't have an awful lot of time to pay attention to it today, as I was working on another project this afternoon. I'm totally ahead of myself. It's actually going through the House of Lords. See, as I say, I haven't been concentrating on this subject today because I was working on something else. But what I do hope is that it is kicked back to the House of Commons, and in effect get defeated. So that MPs have got a chance to actually A, debate it properly, and B, try and work something out before Christmas. Because what this will do is actually, if it's not debated properly and amended, it will actually see an even bigger gulf in inequality within the UK's shores. With regards trade and Scottish produce and all the rest of it. I mean, we've been given a sort of a reprieve at the moment by obviously Trump being defeated and Biden coming out basically saying that within his first 100 days, it is not high up in his agenda to have a look at any UK-US trade deal. So that's a bit of a reprieve as far as I can tell. But at the end of the day, this can open the doors to so many of our values that we actually cherish in Scotland to be completely eroded overnight.
Yeah, listen, Chris, thank you very much for that. Sam, we've talked a few times on this programme about this internal markets bill and how it affects particularly Scotland, because it does undermine the Scotland Act of 1998 by basically allowing the Conservative government to sidestep the Scottish Parliament and directly fund whatever they feel like in Scotland. Is it, do you think, a deal breaker? Do you think this is going to push Scotland even further towards independence if it becomes law?
Well, going by, while you were talking, I've just been kind of looking at updates on the House of Lords, and so far quite a lot of the people, I'm not going to call them their titles because I don't believe in them, but the people have been quite critical right across the political board on the bill. But however, it doesn't just undermine the Scotland Act of 1998, it also undermines the Act of the Union as well,
yes.
Because we've got the right in terms of our own laws and things like that. So however, that's going to undermine that as well. And if it ever does become law, Scotland's now in a precarious situation between Brexit, COVID, and everything else that's happening. We seriously need to make a decision now in terms of where we are and where our standing is in the world. And if we kind of sit back and this is allowed to happen, it is just going to basically take away any powers that we've got, any control of our own destiny we've got away from us, and that's my biggest fear. But hopefully it will be voted out in the House of that place with people who get paid much money this evening. But going by things at the moment, going by this here with live updates, yeah, I think it is going to be voted out.
Very good. Okay, Sam, listen, thank you for keeping us up to date as well. Anyway, moving along. The lack of talks on EU replacement funds is unacceptable. This is a message given today in an urgent meeting which is being sought with the UK government as concern grows about the lack of information on the scheme intended to replace EU structural and investment funds. The EU funding has been worth over £700 million to Scotland over the 2014-2020 programme period. Ivan McKee, the Minister for Trade, Investment and Innovation, says there is little detail on what resources will be allocated to the new UK Shared Prosperity Fund or how it will work. Meantime, he points out that a promised consultation process involving the UK government and the devolved administrations which manage the EU funds has not progressed. Mr McKee has written to the UK Housing, Communities and Local Government Minister Luke Hall seeking a meeting ahead of the UK spending review on the 25th of November. It follows the cancellation of several previous meetings by Mr Hall and his predecessor Simon Clarke. Chris, I'd like to come to you first on this, if I may. Now, these structural funds which come from the EU over this 6-year period are vital to Scotland, aren't they? This is something which can't be just swept under the carpet. Scotland does need this funding, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, of course it does. It's vital to Scotland's infrastructure. You only need to jump in the car, and take a drive around, and you see, signposts up at the roadside saying, this project was funded by the EU money. Like Europe, Scotland, the European Regional Development Fund that's investing in the future. And I think it was actually it was a couple of months ago, but there was a professor Bell or something like that.
Yeah.
He done quite an interesting sort of like piece on the fact that the replacement, the UK's replacement for the Brexit case, it has to be, any funds have to be devolved to the four nations, not just Scotland. Because these
they are regional, Chris, aren't they? They're regional funds.
Well, I'm actually avoiding using the word regional.
Well, that's the way the European Union describes them, I think.
Wales is a region, but no, you're quite right. Because when that money goes to the devolved administration, it then gets filtered down into the various regions in order for use in their infrastructure projects. So in part you are quite right, Gordon. But the internal market bill it's got this sort of like bad taste to it that an awful lot of people, many observers, didn't even think that breaking the international law was going to be part of the UK's government, approach to that.
Yeah.
And what we can see is the fact that all three devolved governments are highlighting this as a major issue, and yet the UK government are yet to give, again, as I alluded to earlier on in the programme, any clarity and leadership as to what they're going to do moving forward.
Okay, listen, thank you, Chris. Sam, very briefly, what was your response to this? What is the UK government going to do to replace these funds? Because, as Ivan O'Key has pointed out, they're not telling anybody and they're not holding any meetings.
That seems to be the kind of the way the UK government or this UK government seem to be kind of running the UK. Basically, since they were elected in December, look what's happened with COVID. Look what's happened with everything. They're not exactly talking. They're not communicating with the devolved governments within the UK. They seem to. It's all this keeping the information to themselves. And I would imagine that this fund is going to be tied up with the internal market bill, and that's why not releasing any information and not having meetings. And again, it all comes down to control.
Right, thank you very much. Thanks for being brief, Sam, as well. Okay, moving on to some brighter news, hopefully. In the new poll out today, voters back Scotland's right to choose. Scots support holding a second referendum if pro-independence MSPs win a majority at Holyrood by a margin of almost 2-1, according to a new poll conducted by Survation and given exclusively to PA Scotland. The research found that 49% agreed that if more than half of the MSPs elected next year came from independence-supporting parties, this would constitute a mandate for another referendum to be held. Only 27% disagreed. When those who did not know were removed, the poll found that 54% agreed and there would be a mandate for a second referendum, while 30% disagreed. The research was part of a previous poll that found support for independence at 54%. Commenting, the SNP Deputy Leader Keith Brown said, "A clear and overwhelming number of voters believe that Scotland should have the right to decide its own future." Westminster's attempt to block the bill, to block the will of the people, will have been in vain, and the pressure on Boris Johnson to respect the democratic rights of voters in Scotland is now immense. Immense indeed. Chris, is it immense enough yet, do you think, for us to hit that magical 60% of Scottish voters that people often talk about?
Well, I would suggest that we shouldn't be complacent and sort of like talk about 60% or 65%. We have to remember the fact that Margaret Thatcher said famously that all Scotland had to do was send down a majority of MPs, to represent Scotland's views, and whatever we wish for, it would get granted to us. In effect.
Well, we saw how that worked out, Chris.
Well, exactly, and I'm not as convinced as what I once was about a majority of independence MSP.
Yeah.
And I tell you why, because I'm throughout my illustrious career as dabbling in politics, I've came across councillors, Green councillors, who actually don't believe in independence.
I'm sure there must be some.
Which actually is a complete oxymoron. But again, I was always troubled with the both votes SNP thing. Because I often thought that as being a sort of like a trumpet carrier for the party and stuff like that. So it's just me being an old Bennite. But what I do think is that if we're not careful, if we don't have a majority of SNP MSPs within Holyrood, Boris Johnson could actually turn around and say, well, you haven't got a majority of SNP MSPs. You might have a majority of independence MSPs, but not SNP. So therefore, you can't dictate to Westminster as to what you want to do. So there is also the argument of the fact that the various groups, independence groups, of which my friend Colette Walker is one who is heading up. And I laud her attempts to do so, but I'm just scared in case we actually end up with a minority SNP government, and because that could actually be challenged a lot easier by the unionist parties, who could possibly form a coalition against us.
Well,
so
Chris,
there's yin yang to everything, Gordon. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, Chris. Well, that's a good comment, I think, to make. Sam, what's your feeling about this? The wording here of the Survation poll is interesting. It quotes a majority of independents supporting MSPs. It doesn't say SNP. Do you think that's deliberate? I think this was just to find out how much support there were for, say, other small independence parties?
Yeah, I think it is deliberate, because at the end of the day, independence is not just about SNP. There is other politicians out there that are not members of SNP who do support independence, and we need to remember that. At the end of the day, independence is pretty much bigger than any political party, but we need the political parties to be the conduit onto independence. My biggest fear is, I understand what Chris is saying, but my biggest fear, it doesn't matter how we vote for Holyrood, Boris Johnson's going to turn round and come up with some sort of excuse. He's going to turn around and say no, because it suits their narrative. It suits they don't want us to be independent. They've made that very clear, and they're just going to make it extremely difficult. And I just think that there comes a point where we need to sit back and decide we take a different road, whether down the kind of international route and things. Because there comes a point where you've got to say, right, we've tried X, Y, and Z, but we've tried A, B, and C, and this is not working. So how many more times do we keep trying to do it by the governance of the UK? There comes a point where we need to say this is no longer working, and we need to then head down the international route and look at alternatives.
Okay, Sam, thank you very much. Very, very clear statement on how you see things there. Okay, now moving again back to Scotland, and the next item is better outcomes for stroke patients. The first steps towards a national thrombectomy service for stroke patients is underway with the launch of a pilot in the north of Scotland. Thrombectomy is a highly skilled procedure in which blood clots are removed mechanically rather than being broken down by medicines, thrombolysis. It's used to treat those with severe stroke and to reduce their risk of long-term disabilities. NHS Tayside developed a training programme in mechanical thrombectomy, or MT, supported by the Scottish Government. Key staff were trained by Professor Iris Grunwald, one of the UK's leading stroke thrombectomy interventional neuroradiologists. That's a real mouthful to say, using advanced simulation techniques. Initially, the thrombectomy procedures in Dundee will be performed on patients in Tayside before the service is extended to patients across the north. A fully operational 24/7 service is anticipated in Tayside by 2023 and will form part of a national network in line with the Scottish Government's programme for government commitment. In the west of Scotland, the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital campus will provide a hub thrombectomy service for the west of Scotland by 2023, whilst NHS Lothian service will also be operating from the Little France site within the same time frame. Now, Sam, let me come to you first of all. This surely is an excellent idea, a new treatment which helps stroke victims and protects them from further damage. Now, we all know, I think, that the Nationals, one of their columnists, Paul Kavanagh-Mawson, is famously in hospital at the moment, having suffered a stroke. So this is in many people's minds. How important do you think it is for Scotland to be leading the way in this kind of medical procedure?
Again, this goes down to showing that Scotland is full of pioneers, and we have got some of the most amazing brains in the country who come up with these treatments. It is so important. Stroke just causes so much pain, damage to families, patients. My ex-partner basically had a stroke in his mid-20s, and people don't think of young people having strokes, they do. And the other thing is my mum lost her life to a stroke, and it was the clots, because the treatment, the drugs that they were giving her were not able
fast
to
enough, is it?
The clots.
Yeah.
Couldn't break up the clots. No. And because of the drugs that they use, they've got to be very careful with the dosages and things like that, because the side effects and things. So this is absolutely fantastic. This is great, and I'm looking forward to seeing it get out, because there's so many people out there that are going to benefit off it, and there's so many people who are going to live longer because of it and not have the disabilities as well. Hopefully that'll kind of combat that as well. So yeah, I'm well excited. Okay. It's really good.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for that. Chris, what's your reaction to this today? So a remarkable new treatment and being rolled out across Scotland for the first time, and obviously they're planning to do this right across Scotland by 2023.
Yeah, and again, commenting directly on a personal friend of mine, Paul, more famously the wee ginger Doug. I wish Paul a speedy recovery. I hope he's watching. And also the fact that his recent crowdfunder as well has been well documented, and I'm just so pleased that the Loving Arms of Scotland has actually reached out and supported him in his hour of need. But the wider point that I would like to comment on this particular story is the fact that once again this just shows that the Scottish Government is getting on with the day job.
Yeah.
You don't hear these stories emanating from England.
You certainly don't
And
hear
if
them
you
from the mainstream media, Chris, do you?
very, very underreported.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is a great item to discuss. It's a great item to promote because not only does it endeavour to help people who have fallen victim to stroke, but it also shows the fact that the Scottish Government are getting on with the day job at the same time as fighting this pandemic. So, I think it's absolutely wonderful. I really do. And I just on one other thing, if I could just hark back to what we were last talking about there, Gordon, because I think it's important. We ask people to tweet in and make a comment. Well, there was a chat there, thingy, and he was basically making the point there. I think his name is James Livingston. And he was making the point there that the SNP are a means to an end. Well, I would like to possibly put a question out there and say, is the SNP, are they a truck to independence, or or is there any other route? Because
Chris,
at the end of the day, the SNP are the main sort of big party in town.
Well, Chris, you made your point. Thanks for that. Okay, moving on now, and another medical story for you. And this is regarding more support for medical specialities. Up to 64 additional medical speciality training posts are being created as part of the Scottish Government response to the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. NHS Education for Scotland, the NES, is recommending recruiting 13 extra training posts in intensive care medicine, with additional posts also being created in public health medicine, virology and medical microbiology. Successful applicants for the positions in Scotland will start from autumn 2021. Funding of up to £8.5 million is being made available to support these extra posts over the next 3 years. Briefly, if you would, Sam, what's your reaction to this? Another good news story, it seems that the Scottish Government is expanding the expertise of the medical community to fight COVID-19.
Yeah, and it makes sense, they've got to, because at the end of the day, this is what we're dealing with right now, and it's a major pandemic. So, yeah, it's good to see that they are doing this, and so what can I say? It's another good news story, Gordon.
Okay, Sam, yeah, admirably brief as usual. Chris, are you able to be as brief as Sam in your response to this one?
Honestly, Gordon, in order to sort of make up time, you know what I mean, we've just got to welcome it. And again, I'll just highlight what I said in the last news item regarding health. It just shows once again that what you get from the Scottish Government is clarity and leadership, and it is capable of doing the day job. So there we are.
Okay, Chris, thank you very much for your brevity. Now, moving to Kosovo now. The Kosovo ex-president Taci is pleading not guilty to war crimes charges. The former Kosovo president Hashim Taci today pleaded not guilty to all war crimes charges brought against him in his first appearance before a judge after being taken into custody at The Hague. Taci, who led the guerrilla uprising against Serbian forces in the 1998-99 as a commander of the Kosovo Liberation Army, faces 10 counts of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Defence lawyer David Hooper said that he would request that Taci, who after resigning as president turned himself in to the European Union police in Kosovo before he was flown to The Hague, to be released pending his trial. Prosecutors accused Taci of responsibility for nearly 100 murders of civilians during the late 1990s conflict, when he led forces in the KLA in a revolt against security forces of the then Serbian President Slobodan Milosevic. His indictment, made public on Thursday, accused him of heading a criminal enterprise that targeted opponents who were abducted, interrogated and mistreated. Sam, this is an unusual story. Not many people actually know much about what happened during the Kosovo and the war in the Balkans. What's your feeling about this? This man is accused of having murdered up to 100 people. I mean, it is a war crime, isn't it? if he's found
Yeah, it is a
guilty.
war crime. Yeah, it is a war crime, and at the end of the day, he should be held responsible for his actions or his alleged actions.
Yeah.
That he it's quite hard, isn't it, to comment on something that's ongoing. So yeah, it's we'll need to keep an eye on the court proceedings and see what's going to happen. And personally, I hope he is found guilty. And but however, apart from that, it's quite hard to comment without putting the word allegedly in with every single sentence. So I'm just going to leave it there, Gordon.
Fair enough, Sam. Okay, thank you. Chris, I noticed that the defence counsel for Mr Tachi was emphasising the fact that Tachi handed himself in to the police, the European Union police, before he was brought to The Hague. Do you think that's significant? Do you think Mr Tachi feels that he's being mistreated, or that the charges against him shouldn't be allowed?
Well, it could be seen as that, Gordon, because it's very hard to basically vilify anybody as a war criminal when he was actually fighting a despot, the likes of Slobodan Milosevic, and you know, as Sam quite rightly says, you know, it's hard to comment on an ongoing criminal investigation, and it's criminal. But as I said, you know, well, actually, you know, someone famously saying, you know, that there are no winners in war, only
That's
losers
true.
on both sides.
Yeah.
And you know, I actually think that compared to Milosevic, I find it hard to put this guy in the same
He's not in the
context.
same league somehow, is he? In
Oh,
terms of
no, he's
numbers.
definitely not.
He's a murderer,
But by the end of the day, you know, he was not exactly.
So
He was not exactly blameless in the whole
No.
affair. But you know, it really is a tough one, Gordon. It really is.
I'm sure the courts in The Hague will have plenty of evidence, I suppose, to hear before they pass sentence. Anyway, let's move on now. And the Virgin Hyperloop is hosting the first people on a test ride on the new transport system. Virgin Hyperloop has completed the world's first passenger ride on a super high-speed levitating pod system, the company said yesterday, in a key safety test for a technology which it hopes will transform human and cargo transportation. Virgin Hyperloop executives Josh Geigel and the Chief Technology Officer and Sarah Lucian, the Director of Passenger Experience, reached speeds of up to 107 miles per hour, 172 kilometers per hour, at the company's DevLoop test site in Las Vegas, Nevada, the company said. Los Angeles-based Hyperloop envisions a future where floating pods packed with passengers and cargo hurtle through vacuum tubes at 600 miles per hour or faster. In a Hyperloop system which uses magnetic levitation to allow to allow near silent travel, a trip between New York and Washington would take just 30 minutes. That would be twice as fast as a commercial flight jet and 4 times faster than a high-speed train. Sam, this sounds remarkable, but the idea of travelling in an evacuated tube in a pod being propelled by magnetic levitation, does that appeal to you as a member of the travelling public? 600 miles an hour?
At the end of the day, this has been ongoing since 2014, and from what I would like to believe, it's based on the maglev trains that they use in Tokyo and so forth. And one of the biggest problems with it, because I was been looking into it, because I do find it quite interesting, and I find it quite futuristic, and the sci-fi kind of geeky part of my brain is like, oh, this looks good. You know, it quite interests me, you know, and the kind of questions I would want to know is about the G-force, because obviously we know about the G-force and effects on the human body when you're going at certain speeds and how it's going to, you know, that kind of stuff. And another thing is also going from the kind of environmental tree hugger part of me is
Yes.
thinking about the infrastructure and the planning permission and the planning process, because in order for this to take off, you need to build
This huge pipe,
the
isn't it?
yeah, and the thing is as well, it's the going by what I quickly read on it, and it's a bit like the train system,
Yeah.
the magnet train system. There is a lot of disruption. There is a lot of disturbance. So, for instance, for it to go from the full length of the UK, it's quite limited as well.
Yeah.
So there's pros and cons to it, but at the end of the day, in terms of technology, we're at the beginning. We're still in baby steps. We're still at the beginning. Give it another 20, 30 years, and I'll be too old to enjoy this wonderful experience. They will probably have moved forward and hopefully looked into it. And it's got the potential of being a lot more a greener way of travelling as well. So there is pros and cons, but we're still at the beginning of it.
Okay, Sam. Listen, Chris, I'm going to involve you in the next item in just a moment. And this is one I think which is interesting in terms of Scottish transport, which I know Chris is interested in. And this is a £500 million sum of money for bus priority infrastructure. The Scottish Government is continuing its programme of investment for over £500 million in bus priority infrastructure. The Blue Partnership Fund will support local authorities in a partnership with bus operators to tackle the negative impact of congestion on bus services, so that bus journeys are quicker and more reliable, encouraging more people to travel by bus. The Bus Partnership Fund will complement the new powers of the Transport Scotland Act 2019. It will enable local authorities in partnership with bus operators to work together to develop and deliver ambitious schemes that incorporate bus priority measures to tackle the negative impacts of congestion. In doing so, this will make bus use more attractive, increasing bus usage and patronage, which in turn leads to greater investment in better services. Work had been paused due to COVID-19 and the pandemic. However, the programme for government published in September reaffirmed the commitment to this funding programme as a key part of Scotland's green recovery. So, Chris, I know that you are your main area of expertise is in the aviation industry. What's your take on this? This sounds like another good news story for Scotland.
Well, yeah, of course it is, and you know what I would like to try and sort of like explore is a more a more conciliatory working relationship between the SNP and the Green Party in order to further projects such as this. You know, because we do need a greener, just transition from fossil fuels over to using more commodities of renewable energy.
Yep.
But you know what I would like to see is actually a reduction of city traffic, and you know the actual city being solely reliant on bus use. Ideally, I would like the whole city to return to the way it was in the 1930s and 40s.
The tram system.
Tram system,
Yeah.
which was as green could be,
Okay.
because it basically worked on a trolley pull system and overhead electrification.
Yeah.
And when you think the fact that we're not now harvesting coal out of the mines in order to power electric generators, you know, we can use that renewable energy in order to power the electric generators and use electric trams and buses in the city centre and keep the cars out, then that'll be a lot better for the environment.
Chris, excellent ideas as usual. Anyway, we've just about run out of time for this evening, so it just remains for me to, as usual, to give an appeal on behalf of Broadcasting Scotland. And if you'd like to see more programmes like this made by Broadcasting Scotland, you can do that by becoming a supporter. All you need to do is follow the instructions that are on your screen now. That's it from the programme for tonight. My thanks as usual to Chris McCusker and to Sam Payton for being my guests. And from the three of us this evening, a very good night to you. Hey, well done. Thanks, folks. That was a
Okay.
good way to end,
You're welcome.
Chris.